Hello everybody, this is Sneaky the Lost, and welcome to a mod spotlight on Industrial Foregoing. Now, I've had another one that I had up previously. Let's just say the recording quality left a little to be desired, and there's been some new features that I really want to show off in this mod. So, let's get started. First off, what is Industrial Foregoing? Well, it is the natural successor to a mod called Minefactory Reloaded, which in turn was the natural successor to a mod that you may or may not have heard of called Forestry, which, by the way, was a natural successor to the original Minefactory mod that was originally a Buildcraft add-on way back in the day before Forestry even existed. So the concept here has been around almost as long as modded Minecraft has been. But let's go ahead and see the modern take on it. So to get started in Industrial Foregoing, you're going to need a bit of plastic. So how do you get plastic? Well, what you're going to need is at least one tree fluid extractor and a latex processing unit. So a tree fluid extractor will be able to take a log, any type of log, it doesn't matter. Check with your mod pack developers for cross-mod interactions as far as that goes, and it will produce liquid latex. Now, you can have multiples. That does not get you more liquid latex per block, it just gets it faster. So there's a limited use in getting many of them because you won't need that much plastic in this mod unless you really go full ham on it. Now, the latex processing unit is going to need some energy, is going to need some water, and it's going to need some of that liquid latex, and it's going to produce tiny dry rubber. So what do we do with tiny dry rubber? Well, we go ahead and we craft it up. 9 tiny dry rubber makes for a dry rubber, and then you can just smelt up the dry rubber straight into plastic. So that's how you get plastic and get into the mod. However, the key here is this latex processing unit requires water and requires power. Now, in the previous guide, I said that, you're going to have to piggyback off of another mod to do that. That is not the case anymore. Because there is now, let's go ahead and actually look at this recipe here, the pitiful fuel generator. Now, because I've got thermal expansion and thermal foundation going, it's going to give us this crafting recipe here. The mod does a good job of doing cross-mod integration by itself. Otherwise, it's, just going to be some iron ingots instead of iron gears. And again, this may get changed depending on your mod pack. See your local mod pack retailer for more details about how they do things. But basically, you're looking at a little bit of things. It is a pitiful fuel generator. It burns. It's not very efficient, but any kind of thing that'll burn in a furnace, you can piggyback yourself and get going, and then just manually provide it water via a bucket until you get going. So now that you have plastic, you can really get into this mod. So what are the things that you can do? Well, there's this water condensator, which is basically an aqueous accumulator by a different name. If you have water source blocks adjacent to it, it will produce water, and it will increase the amount of water throughput it can provide based on the number of water blocks it is adjacent to. You'll notice how it is directly attached to each other. That is not normal functionality. That is because there is an add-on. We'll get into add-ons in the next section of this of this video. So the primary use of this mod originally anyway, was to automate the production of plant and animal products. So for the plant products, we have this plant gatherer, and under here there is actually a plant sower down here. Yeah, plant sower. Now, interesting thing about the plant sower, you'll notice that each of these blocks are kind of color-coded, and I've got some things here, and some things here, and some things here. This is actually going to be really useful, because as you'll notice up here, they are planted in rows, with potatoes over here, and then carrots in the middle, and then seeds here on the right. So as you look at the orientation of the block, you will actually you can actually set up some kind of multi-crop automation along those lines. You've got 9 different sections that it will plant in. Now, normally it doesn't have a very large radius. I have actually added a +2 range add-on. These are going to be necessary these days. They don't start with a range greater than 1 normally. So you are going to need these range add-ons, which add to radius. So normally it would be a radius of 1. Because I have a +2 add-on, it is now a 5x5, 2 in each direction, and so on and so forth. So if you wanted your typical 9x9 farm that can run on exactly 1 water bucket in the middle, you're going to want a radius upgrade of 4. So, the sower requires power, requires the plants to be able to plant in here, and will produce that. One of the things I do want to show you about these machines in general is some of these buttons down here. Crop hoeing is enabled. You can also disable that if you don't want things being hoed. That would be if you're doing stuff like sugarcane. They don't need to be hoed. So that functionality is there. Show working SCP. And then this stuff over here, which is going to be interesting as well. And you'll notice a couple of add-ons working in there too. So, why are the potatoes not going down there? Oh, because they were not added to the resonant servo, obviously. That makes sense. So we're just going to go ahead and do that. And I just used the thermal dynamics as a way of just connecting everything. And then you see it just filled up here. So this is the plant gatherer. It does exactly what you'd think. It gathers plants. It will chop down trees in its area. You can tell it to gather anything, gather trees, gather plants. The reason you might want to do that is, say, if you've got a cocoa farm, you don't want it to gather trees, because you don't want it to gather the logs that the cocoa plants are on. So this gives you some more functionality. Now let's look at the show working area here. And now, previous mods of this sort, you needed to use the hammer or something to be able to see that. This is just a turn on and off button. Makes it very easy to see exactly what is going to be affected by this. Now then, there's some other things in the area here that you also want to look at. Hydrator is a little bit more advanced machine. It's basically a growth tick accelerator, which does what you'd expect growth tick accelerators to do. It makes things just grow a little bit faster. It requires power, and it basically makes things run smoother. And then you have the plant fertilizer, which is a little bit different. It's not a growth tick accelerator. What it does is it applies industrial fertilizer to any plant in its area, which you can get over here. And this is what I like about this mod, is that it has an interconnected rather than tiered tech tree. We'll get into that in just a second. So, we've got this animal rancher here, and what that does is that will, in this case, since I've got cows in here, it will create milk that you can do. It will shear sheep. I believe it will pick up chicken eggs as well. Maybe even chicken feathers, depending on mod interactions. Down here is the animal sewer. That is producing liquid sewage that is then going into the sewage composter to make the fertilizer that you then put in the plant fertilizer. So again, you've got this loop going on of, you grow wheat, you feed the cows wheat, the cows poop and make sewage that is turned into fertilizer that is used to make your plants grow faster. It's a wonderful world. You have the animal feeder here. You give it food that the animals want. It will make them get in the mood. Just like so. So it will basically feed everything. Now then, you notice these little baby cows are going zip, zip. What's going on with that? This is an animal baby separator. And it does exactly what it says on the tin. It will separate the baby cows from the adult cows and put them in their own holding pen, which has an animal grower. Now, an animal grower is like an animal feeder, only instead of getting them going, because, we're talking about minors here, we don't talk about those things. We instead will cause them to grow up very rapidly. So I do this. There we go. They're starting to grow up very fast. And you notice something's going on over here. Let's take a look at that. So this is the animal baby separator, only it's got an adult filter, so it will filter adults instead of babies. So it pulls the adults over to here, which runs into the mob crusher. Now, your mob crusher is effectively, your mob farm. You can use this to set up a dark room, set up all kinds of stuff. So you can spawn, if you've got spawners, you're wanting to automate the killing of mobs and mob collected resources, the mob crusher is your jam. And it does count as a player kill when the mob crusher kills a mob. So things like the various elemental blazes from Thermal Foundation that normally don't drop their rods unless a player kills them, this will work. Now then, Mob Duplicator requires this mob essence, and you're getting this mob essence from the mob crusher, slowly but surely. There's a couple of other things that produce mob essence as well. We'll get into those in just a second. So, the Mob Duplicator uses the Mob Imprisonment tool, and I am contractually and legally obligated to state that while it may somewhat superficially resemble a spherical object from a well-known intellectual property, due to copyright reasons, this is in no way similar or identical to such an object. But you just right-click a mob. It can be a hostile mob or a passive mob. We're just going to take one of these cues, slap it in here, and bada bing, bada boom, we got more cows. We've got cows. You can do that with more difficult to obtain mobs, blazes, and the various elemental variations of the blazes, things along those lines. Wither skeletons to be able to make withers happen. So that's your basic progression line for plants and animals. Now let's talk about power. I mentioned the very pitiful reactor. There's another couple of ways to be able to do this, though. For example, there's this bioreactor, and it is creating biofuel. But if you look at it, it says efficiency 100% because it has 9 separate items in it. And so it is producing 160 millibuckets per tick times 9 items. So that's like, what, 140 something? 140, yeah, 1,000 something millibuckets. So just over a bucket of bioreactor, biofuel per reaction, which is actually kind of cool. But that's only if you have 9 separate items in there. If you have less, let's go ahead and pause this. You see this play button, you can actually pause it right here, and you'll see it even says paused at the top of the machine, right? So if I were to start pulling things out here, and you notice it can only hold 16 per inventory slot, that makes backstuffing automation a lot less painful. You'll notice the efficiency is less. And as I continue removing things, if you run it off of just one item, you're only going to be getting 80 millibuckets per tick out of a single item. If I put in a second one, it will be producing 90 millibuckets per item. So it won't just be producing 90 millibuckets, it'll be producing 180 millibuckets per tick. So not only are you increasing the amount of biofuel per item, you are also increasing the total amount of biofuel production per iteration. So it really makes sense to fill this bad boy up. And then that's going into this biofuel generator that produces RF and consumes biofuel in the process. And this is a more advanced block over here. This is an energy field provider. And I've stuck in a huge range add-on. Its range is basically this whole guide. It's the answer to what is the size of this is yes. And I've done that to kind of trivialize the power for the purposes of this guide. But in reality, this energy field provider can be used to automate stuff and unclumsy wire your base a little bit. Any of these machines can accept a power add-on, like say this one, energy field add-on. Once you craft an energy field add-on, you will need to shift right-click an energy field provider so it will know which one it is pulling from. You put it in there and it will automatically, wirelessly provide power as long as the energy field provider is provided with energy to give. So that is can be a useful energy power source. There are a couple of other interesting generators that have come up since the last time I did one of these spotlights. In particular, the petrified fuel generator and the protein generator are some really interesting blocks. I'm not going to get into too much detail. I'm going to let you play around with those, but this thing can run very, very high levels of power if you give it very energy dense things to burn. Instead of burning for longer, it burns more RF per tick. So if you give it, say, a coal block, it will produce 9 times the energy per tick as a piece of coal instead of burning it for 9 times as long. So this can really spike energy output. Protein generator runs off of processed rotten flesh. Use is fairly obvious. So let's talk about this material StoneWork factory. I really like this machine. It's a really this is your entire cobbleworks in a block. So what does it do? At its most basic, it is a cobblegen. It will produce cobblestone. But then you can tell it what to do with this cobblestone. So for example, what I've done here is I've told it to grind. So it will grind up cobblestone into gravel. grind again, so it will grind up gravel into sand, then smelt that sand into glass. And you can do all kinds of things with this production cycle. You don't have to do that. We could, for example, here we go, smelt it and then 2x2 craft it. And then when we tell it to go, it'll start producing stone bricks. We could create sandstone. We could create all kinds of interesting things with this. This is basically anything that starts off as cobblestone can be made to function here. And pro tip for those who are trying to get their AE2 systems to work in mini packs, you can just go grind, and you can create silicon straight off the bat from sand. Pretty handy. Now, the plant gatherer will produce sludge slowly as it does its thing. And the sludge refiner consumes this sludge to produce various dirt-like resources: clay, soul sand, podzol, various useful things. However, unlike Mine Factory Reloaded, this machine is OSHA compliant and will not apply the weather effect on anybody nearby. Thankfully. So, what else can we do in this mod? Well, there's one other thing that I really want to go over in this pack before we're going to kind of call this and let you do some exploration. By the way, there is this wonderful book here, the Industrial Foregoing Manual. It's not that hard to make, and it can talk about all of the different things that it can do. For example, instead of using the mob crusher, you could use a mob slaughter factory. It will produce liquid meat and pink slime. Pink slime is a resource that you will need for certain higher end blocks like that StoneWork factory. So that's a thing, and then it can be used to basically auto feed you with the meat feeder. You fill that up with the liquid meat, it feeds you. I don't know how good it might taste, but at least you don't have to worry about passively eating anymore. And then there's these fun people, the laser base and the 4 laser drills. What does this do? Well, it's an auto miner. It has to look at either bedrock or void, one or the other, and then you need to give it a lot of power. How much power typically is modified in your particular mod packs, but by default I think it's like 3,000 RF each, so 3 times 4 is 12,000 RF per tick to keep this thing running at maximum power. However, it does produce ores very usefully. Of course, I'm going to very quickly run my little energy network out of power by doing this, so we're going to go ahead and pause these again so we don't run those dry. But, you know, if you've got that kind of power generation, you need some ores, yeah, there you go. So there are a few more things that are interesting in this pack. The big one we're going to talk about here is going to be add-ons. This is a new function that has really been augmented since the last time I did this mod spotlight. Before, there were really only the range upgrades, and they've actually kind of expanded that functionality in a way that I thought was pretty cool. For example, you have the fluid transfer and item transfer and item stack transfer add-ons, and you notice a push down and pull down. You can change that. For example, this is a fluid transfer add-on pull from below. So what it is doing, it is pulling water from this water condensator into the latex processing unit. That is not standard functionality. Without this, this machine would slowly run out of water because this does not automatically export and this does not automatically import. That's what these add-ons are for. So you can do that to use some better automation and really kind of start removing all of these pipes if you really wanted to. You could set up this thing directly adjacent to it and put in a fluid transfer add-on pull to the, what direction is this? From that direction to pull water in there. So you could do that as well. And of course, range add-ons, as I said, are by radius, not by diameter. So you can get some really big add-ons. And there's a couple of things that have specific uses, like say the adult transfer add-on to be able to, the adult filter to invert the puller over here that I was using in my setup earlier, from the animal baby separator to the animal baby separator with the adult filter to be able to pull adults into the slaughter pen. So that's a really useful thing. One of the lesser known things about these, however, is that they can also accept the Tesla core add-ons. Because this does depend on Tesla core for a lot of its energy functionality, so it can accept the energy upgrades and the speed upgrades from Tesla core lib. So that's also a very useful bit of information if you want things to go faster. Also, one last tip about going faster. The way the logic works with these machines is it works one block at a time, and it goes down row by row until it finally gets everything taken care of and it starts over again. Well, the larger the area, the more blocks it has to individually check. And therefore, the slower any given block in here is going to be harvested. It will all eventually be harvested by the block, but it might take a longer time. So if you have a very large farm and you find that it isn't being harvested as fast as you want, you can put in speed upgrades to try and increase the rate at which it does things, or you can break it up into multiple smaller fields, like say instead of having an 11 by 11 field, you only have 9 3 by 3 fields. And so you'll have more plant gatherers and sowers, but at that point you will be able to also harvest them 9 times faster because you've got 9 of them running in serial. So that's an interesting thing if you find yourself being choked on just, it doesn't harvest the crops fast enough, you've got half of your field sitting fallow at any given time, then that is definitely a way to get things going. So, really awesome mod. I consider it to be a straight-up improvement to its predecessor, Mine Factory Reloaded. It simply is a very well-done, elegant mod. It's got a lot of functionality its predecessors didn't have, like the Show Working Area button that is just so huge for setting things up. It now has an entire conveyor belt system that it didn't have the last time I did this spotlight that you can look into if you are so inclined. That's got a lot of logic functionality built into it. It's got some other things in there that we haven't even touched on because this is really going to be more of a high-level overview anyway. It does have the black hole units that stores a large int, which is approximately 2.3 billion of a single item. Yeah, billion with a B. So a lot of stuff that goes in there. You also have a black hole tank that stores a similarly obscene amount of a given fluid. The black hole controller Mark 2.0 can be basically used as a drawer controller for them. The resourceful furnace actually produces mob essence as it smelts things. You know what? I'm just going to stop myself here and tell you, go install the mod, play around with it, have fun with it. As always, this is Sneaky the Lost, signing off.